Hello, this brief presentation is designed to help students in my sports literature class be able to start working on producing the outline for their research paper. Uh, as you start watching this presentation, it is assumed at this point that you have probably already finished up all of your research. You've got all of the notes that you need, and you're ready to start taking that information and organize it into a way that you're going to eventually be able to write the rough draft of your paper. So if you're not done with your research yet, I would go back and finish that before you start progressing into this little video here, and then start building your outline. Another word, I consider the outline to be one of the more important steps in writing any kind of paper. It's where you organize all your thoughts, get them down on paper so that you can then write an organized paper. So take your time with this. You may end up watching this presentation a couple times, pause it, read some of the slides a little bit more closely, and make sure you understand actually what's being discussed here. First, when we start discussing what actually is an outline, there are writers out there that they can just jump into a piece of writing and produce a pretty good essay. I think those writers are few and far between, and I really think when it comes to something extensive such as a research paper, you're better off plotting it out and planning it before you're going to actually sit down and write. For more informal writing assignments, I think you can kind of wing it a little bit. Research papers, I just don't see it as much. The whole idea is it's a blueprint. It's a plan of what you're actually going to put down on the paper instead of just kind of shooting blind. Builders that were going to build a house, they wouldn't just grab a whole bunch of wood and start hammering it together and hope it turns out okay. They would plan it beforehand, and that's kind of what you're doing here. Now, you've probably seen outlines like this before where you're given a bunch of blanks to fill in, and this is good. I know a lot of speech classes will use things like this, and this has all the important elements that you need to have there. I think it can be a little bit more flexible, though, and I think you really need to understand why you're doing some of those things, which is the point of this presentation. So the basic idea of this is, and I'm not going to talk about this slide a whole lot, you start with an introduction to your topic over on this side, and you state a general thesis. It's a general idea of what you're going to discuss. You have major points that prove or back up that thesis throughout the course of your paper, and then you end with a conclusion. So that's the basic idea of an outline. It's just we need to get this into more of laid out on paper so that you can actually take that information and start writing a rough draft from it, and that's where we get here. The basic way that you're going to start laying this out is this first level you're going to have is going to have your thesis statement, your general point, and then what are going to be the major subtopics that you're going to have. And you can repeat as many of these as you need to make your point. For a shorter research paper, such as what you're doing, a 5 to 7 page paper, you're going to have probably more than 3 subtopics. You're probably going to have in the range of probably 5, somewhere in there. Even shorter research papers, you could get by with 3 major subtopics. But as you start getting more extensive research papers, as you get on into college and beyond, they're going to be a lot more. There's going to be a lot more subtopics. Now, those subtopics, they're going to come from your research. You probably found as you were doing your research that you were grouping your information together, and that's where if you were using note cards, you probably had the subtopics written up in the top corner, or if you were using the note sheets, you probably were listing what area or what subject that piece of information was falling under, and that's where those major subtopics are going to come from. Now, the next step is, once you have those, you're going to start filling in the basic parts. The example I'm using here is I did an example research paper for this sports literature class a couple years ago where my main point was how important the 1999 Women's World Cup was. So I have my thesis statement there that you can see, and then I have 3 major subtopics. And this was fairly simple. I would have gone probably more in depth on this if I was actually going to turn this into a full research paper, but for the purposes of just explaining the process to all of you, I kept it fairly brief. So you can see my first major subtopic of how I'm going to explain why the Women's World Cup in 1999 was such a big deal was it increased popularity for soccer. Second was it was an economic success. And then third, it just increased the popularity of women's sports in general. Those are my big general ideas or big general reasons on why the Women's World Cup was such a big event. you've probably seen some research papers, you've read example research papers before that had bold subtitles throughout the paper. That's kind of what this is. Magazine articles will use this sometimes if they're a little bit longer, where they have subtitles. Textbooks do it. That's kind of what this is. So then once you have those, you're ready to move into this stage. And this is where we're kind of getting to the paragraph level. So I'm going to mainly focus on the second part here, where I'm discussing increased popularity for soccer. Now there's two paragraphs I'm going to write there. One is going to be about how participation rates increased for girls, which would not be that surprising for a Women's World Cup, but I also found through my research that participation rates increased for boys. And I have enough information that I feel like I can talk about these two things in two separate paragraphs. These are essentially going to be the topic sentences for each of my paragraphs. The very first sentence of this paragraph here is going to say something about how participation rates increase for girls. And then you can see in each of these different sections here how I've got separate paragraphs. So if you count this up just in this very brief research paper, I'm going to have 9 body paragraphs. And if I was going to want to go a little bit longer, then I would have some more body paragraphs in there, or I may even expand out into another subtopic here and have a fifth subtopic, or I'm sorry, a fourth subtopic. But now that I have this, I have kind of what my paragraphs are going to talk about. Now I'm ready to take the next step. And this is where you actually start putting your research into the paper. I had two separate notes, two pieces of research that I felt like supported my idea here about participation rates increasing for girls. And again, I'm not going to read these, but you can see that I've listed them pretty much word for word, what I'm going to put in the paper. I've also included the in-text citation. Now, a lot of people will complain. They're like, I don't want to have to do that right now. Here's the advantage to that. If you do it right now during the outline, you don't have to do it later when you're actually writing the paper. When you sit down and you begin writing your rough draft, you can have a printed copy of this outline sitting next to you, and you don't have to touch any of your note cards as long as you have enough information. You don't have to figure out what the in-text citation is going to be. It's already done for you. Saves a lot of time. It may take a little bit of time here during the outlining process, but it will save you time during the actual drafting process when you're worried about creating good sentences, making sure everything sounds clear, worried about your word choice and all of that. But you will do that for each of these steps. Now I've only highlighted just this first one here, but eventually it's going to look something like this. You're going to notice I didn't actually write the notes in here just to save time and space, but you can see I'm going to write the note here and then have the in-text citation followed by that period, and I'll do that for each one of those. Now I've only listed one note for each of these different parts, but this first one had 2. You're more than welcome to have 2 if you feel like you need it, but you should at least have one note that you're going to put in there. Now I will kind of admit right now, a lot of teachers will say if you have this point here, or if you have a 1, you should have to have a 2. There's going to be more stuff that you are going to discuss in this paragraph here. The only thing I'm listing is just the note. You're going to fill in the blanks here, so that's why I'm not too worried about if you have a 1, you have to have a 2. Just understand there's going to be more to it than just what's listed here. Now, if you get to this level with your outline, you are in really, really good shape. You should be able to go ahead and submit your outline for grading in class and be in really good shape. Now at this point you can go ahead and stop this presentation as far as the outline is concerned, but I'm going to go ahead and take the next step as if, well, how do you take this information that you have on the outline and actually turn it into a paragraph? Now I'm going to take that next step so you can see it, but if all you need to worry about is the outline right now, go ahead and stop that, and you can come back to this later on. But let's take a look at this. You can see here, and again, I'm not going to read this word for word. I would maybe encourage you to pause right now and read this information and then start the presentation back up so that what I'm talking about makes more sense. But I'm going to go ahead and discuss it here. So you can see this paragraph where I'm going to talk about participation rates increasing for girls. I have those 2 pieces of information, those 2 notes that I'm going to insert into the paragraph over here. And you can see what it starts looking like with this. I've labeled the different parts. I have a topic sentence there where I'm explaining what actually am I going to talk about in this paragraph? Then I have my two pieces of evidence, where I have the notes listed with their in-text citations. But I don't just leave it at that. I have to explain, why are those notes in there? What are they actually telling the reader as they go through this? And that's what's labeled in pink there for the explanation. But if I have done that, I have a pretty well constructed paragraph and am ready to move on into my next step. I might worry about putting a better transition into this, but as far as just getting the basics down of a paragraph, I'm pretty happy with this. So hopefully that makes a little more sense for you as you move into the process of taking your outline and converting it into a paragraph. And I wish you luck in that next step. And always, if you have questions or anything, please make sure that you ask during class time or shoot me an email. Thanks, and good luck.